Okay, 1 second. Okay, you are live, Evelyn.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's Evelyn Aka from Aka Business Immigration Law. Thank you so much for joining me on our live today. We're going to be focusing on cross-border business and how you can move your business to Canada or the United States and talk through all of the things you need to consider. And then, of course, feel free to reach out to us at our firm, Aka Business Immigration Law, so that we can see about your specific situation and make sure you have a very strong chance of being successful. Let's get started. And again, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to share my screen so you can see everything that I'm seeing as well. Okay, so I can see now that you can see my screen. And so we'll get started on our LinkedIn Live. Again, welcome. I'm Evelyn Aka. This is our cross-border expansion to Canada and United States webinar for you. And feel free, once it is finished, we'll be able to share it on all media as well. And you can share it with your friends and colleagues. All right, let's get going. Course, technology never works when you need it to. So today I'm going to introduce myself and talk about some of the strategic reasons you might want to move your business. As well, we're going to talk about options for expansion and corporate structure and legal setup. We're going to talk about the cross-border operations and tax. Again, we're not tax specialists, but we always refer to fabulous tax professionals that work with us in collaboration. We're going to talk about immigration pathways for business owners and executives, work permits for employees and key personnel, and permanent residency and long-term planning for green card and Canadian permanent residence once you are established your business in either Canada or the United States. And last, we're going to talk about cross-border compliance and managing risk and ensuring immigration readiness. Looking forward to working through this with you today. Again, thanks so much for joining. Just a quick overview as to who I am and who we are. The ACA Law team is comprised of highly experienced and passionate immigration lawyers, immigration consultants, paralegals, legal assistants, and other members of the team that provide immigration advice and guidance to businesses, professionals, and their families so that we can support their relocation to Canada and the United States. And that's me. I'm Evelyn Aka. I've been practicing law for going on 26 years, and I've been doing immigration law for most of that time. Clearly, it's a passion that I love. Crossing borders seamlessly. This is one of our taglines at ACA Business Immigration Law. We've been in business for almost 16 years, and for us, that means the fact that immigration rules and regulations are constantly changing. It creates a lot of confusion, especially these days with all the changes south of us in the United States. It's stressful, it can be inefficient, and it's constantly changing. The fact that it's constantly changing is actually, for me, one of the reasons that I've been doing this for so long, because it's never boring, it's always exciting, and you always have to be creative. For more than 25 years, we've been focusing exclusively on cross-border immigration laws for professionals and corporations. The goal at ACA Law is to simplify and streamline and expedite the immigration process and help open doors to new opportunities for you and your staff and your business. We're going to start first with how to move to Canada and talk about all things Canadian immigration before we start talking about the US component. Why expand your business to Canada? If you are watching this and you're from a European country, you're from Australia or other countries, as well as the United States and Mexico, People always say, why do you want to expand to Canada? And I would say that Canada offers wonderful opportunities because of its stable economy and its stable business-friendly environment. It is an attractive option for companies that are looking for international growth. These people can be from all over the world into Canada, not just the United States into Canada. We will be talking about the key advantages of moving to Canada with your business. One of them is that Canada is stable, it's a growth-oriented economy, and it's backed by a resilient legal and financial system. Canada's economy is one of the most stable and secure in the world. Access to global talent through skilled immigration programs is another key factor that people may want to consider bringing their business to Canada, because we've got a highly educated and experienced talent pool for you to draw from as you expand your business. There's a real pro-business immigration framework here in Canada that's designed for founders and key personnel, especially in the innovation space. So we'll talk about that later on as well. And as I said already, we have a thriving innovation hub that supports tech and life sciences across Canada. So we really believe that we are a real place that you can do business and be successful, especially once you grow your business and become a permanent resident. There are opportunities for grants and funding and other partnerships with the Canadian government and provincial governments across the country. Before you think about moving, you have to think about how you're going to do business in Canada. And it always starts with setting up a business in Canada. How are you going to structure your corporation that will be used for you to get to Canada? So we want to talk about that. The structure of the incorporation is really important to give you as much flexibility as possible. Your company's legal structure affects your immigration eligibility. So we want to make sure, for instance, if we're doing an intercompany transfer from the United States, the company has to have a common shareholders, or there has to be an affiliation, something that we can show on a corporate chart that reflects that the organizations are related. So key Canadian considerations for you are, do you want to do a federal incorporation or a provincial incorporation? Depends where you want to do business. Do you want to do a provincial incorporation, maybe from a province that might have lower taxes, but then do an extra provincial registration in the company you might want to do more business in? These are things to think about, and we can help you with that, as well as working with our tax advisors. It's been interesting because over the years, it used to be that you needed to have a Canadian or a permanent resident director for you as a foreigner to incorporate, and that has changed significantly. Many businesses now, many provinces now allow for full foreign ownership of companies that are incorporating. So we need to talk to you about where you want to be, and if the province you're looking at allows for that to happen. If it does, then you're in really good standing and we can help you get that started. We also want to align the structure with your immigration path to beginning at the very beginning to avoid any reapplication delays. So if you know how you want to set up your business, it will make a significant difference when you're thinking about how you want to do business. Do you have other partners? Where you want to operate? And again, tax drives immigration. I always say this, whether it's corporate or personal, you need to understand the tax implications and the tax obligations before you start the immigration process. Tax strategy for cross-border operations. A tax strategy is critical for business immigration success because it impacts how you move money, how you report income, and if you qualify for other certain immigration programs. One thing you need to think about when you move to another country, when you come to Canada, you're establishing credit all over. And many people don't think about that. If you have excellent credit and lots of room to grow in your home country because the banks are giving you lots of loans and funding sources, you need to know that it will be different in Canada. It would take time. You have to reestablish your credit rating, rebuild credit so that the banks and other financial institutions will feel comfortable loaning to you. So you need to structure that and plan for that before you move to Canada. Some considerations for you to consider in Canada are determining tax residency. You want to deal with that to avoid dual taxation. You want to leverage the Canada-US tax treaties or any other Canada tax treaties with your country of origin to structure compensation and intercompany payments. You want to align your profit, repatriation, and investment flow with your visa limits, and you want to prepare source funds and documentation early. This is vital if you're looking to consider future pathways. Even small tax mistakes can impact you significantly. So you always want to think about tax first, and then the immigration partners in secondarily, and we can help you with that. Right? Some of the other things to consider is if you have pension plan, if you have wealth investment plans, you need to think about how you're going to move them. And if you are going to move them, how to do it in the most cost-effective way and the most tax limited way. So we're going to talk about some of the immigration pathways for entrepreneurs, founders, and investors to Canada. For business owners and executives, Canada offers several flexible visa options tailored to your growth plan. Some of the key pathways we're going to talk about: C11. This is the entrepreneur work permit, and it's for entrepreneurs that are bringing economic or cultural benefit to Canada. Sometimes people call us and they say, I want a C11, I want to avoid the LMIA, I don't want to do intercompany transfer for whatever reason, I think I'm a C11. And often I say, I don't agree with that, especially if you're a small business. We use the C11 category for businesses that are significant, that have Canadian employees, that will impact the economy. And often it's for the president, where if we're trying to get them in quickly, we will bypass some of the other procedures and systems to get them here fast. We have to be able to show in a C11 the impact of not getting that person into Canada. So if you're a small shop, maybe you have 500,000 in revenue from your home country and you're starting a brand new business, very unlikely that you will be eligible for C11. It's not seen as a significant impact to Canadian economy if you're not able to get in quickly. You have to go through the normal process. One of the options we're doing a lot these days is the startup visa category. It's been around for a long time. It has changed over the years. The startup visa category is where you work with an incubator, whether you have an innovative business, the incubator is interested in it, and you get a designated organization. It could be a venture capital, an incubator, or an angel investment fund, where they will support you and give you a letter of support. That letter of support is what's going to help you start the business and get permanent residence. This is usually quite a costly venture, and it depends on which partner you work with. It can be anywhere from a $40,000, $50,000 investment up to $1 million, depending on if you're doing it in a group of 5, if you're doing it on your own, and which organizations you work with. You need to very much consider which organization. Make sure they're reputable. Many of them will do everything for you, but you pay for that. They'll build out your business, the business plan. They'll do competitive analysis, the website, the whole process from A to Z in order to help you get that letter of support. When you get the letter of support, you can then apply for permanent residence. And now we actually have people in Canada as visitors who are also applying for work permits while they're waiting on the permanent residence for the startup visa process. Because right now it's taking 3 or 4 years to get permanent residence under the startup visa category. It's not immediate and it's not fast. So if you're thinking about what I can do to get out of the United States, I have to leave quickly, you need to keep this in mind. The one category that we use the most here at Echo Law for people that qualify is the intercompany transfer. This is the transfer process for executives and owners transferring from a foreign business to a Canadian branch that's newly established or that's already in operation. One thing that has changed again in the last 6 months, it used to be, let's say you have a business in Ghana and it's doing successfully and you want to incorporate a new business in Canada. We used to be able to do that and you only needed to have the 2 entities that were related, the one from Ghana and the one in Canada. And then we would transfer the executives or the key personnel to Canada to start growing and launch the business. In the last few months, the government has changed that. So unless you're an American business, you can still do that if you're an American business owner to Canada. However, you cannot do that if you're from any other country, because now the government requires a multinational corporation to be in existence, which means you must have a minimum of 2 businesses in 2 different countries. So every country, let's say Ghana and Nigeria, you need to have 2 before you would even qualify to establish the Canadian business. This is a real limitation that's affecting many people from other countries like India, Pakistan, Saudi, Ghana, anywhere else in the world where you want to do business. it's changing. It only allows for the American citizens to be able to do that with the one company in the US and one company in Canada. So let's talk about work permits for business executives and key personnel. When you expand into Canada, you need to think about which categories that you'll be working under, because in order to expand, you need a work permit. So we've talked about some of the work permit options previously. One of them is also the intercompany transfer. This category is used for executives, professionals, as well as managerial and specialized knowledge workers. So it really depends who you want to transfer. There is a category called the Global Talent Stream, and this is where you can get a labor market impact assessment, an LMIA, because you are doing business in a high-tech and STEM-focused role, and you have a certain salary that is considered high. And usually you have a master's level education or more. And so the government created the Global Talent Stream to expedite the LMIA process, which could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months if you were doing the regular stream. The other thing is the LMIA normal stream, if you're not in the high-tech industry or STEM industry of innovation, you can still come to Canada under an LMIA work permit, but just knowing it's going to take that 3 to 6 month processing time before you can even get your visa and work permit and come to Canada. Those are the employer-specific work permits. As I said, they're often LMIA based or intercompany transfer. If your company is already in existence in Canada and they want to transfer you, you can also do that and move to Canada to start working. Once you're here, then what happens? Once you're here, obviously the plan is you brought your family, because under most of the work permit categories, you can bring your family with you, your spouse and your children, so long as they're dependent still. But then, of course, you want to become a permanent resident. What happens then? And so in order to do that, as your business is growing, hopefully thriving, moving from temporary status to permanent residency, it gives you more flexibility and freedom. So some of the pathways are the C11 to PR. This is the entrepreneur fast track to permanent residence. You need to show that you have created significant benefits in Canada. The most common route to permanent residence is the Federal Express Entry Program. This is a points-based program based on everything from language ability, if you speak English and French, education, age, work experience, your spouse's education, work experience, language testing. All of that will give you a points number, a number. And the government determines usually every 2 or 3 weeks what that number of invitation will be for permanent residents. So that's the federal program. In addition, options are available for provincial nominee programs where you can be working in that province and have the option to also become a permanent resident, because the province will invite you and nominate you under the nomination process. And so if you do that, that means that after maybe 2 years, you can become a permanent resident. Right now, permanent residents take anywhere from 1 to 2 years for most people that have straightforward applications. So it's something to think about, because if you come in under a 3-year work permit, you want to try to get your permanent residence in that 3-year time frame if you can. And if not, of course, as an intercompany transfer, you can extend your status for another 2 years and even up to 7 years if you're an executive. But you really want to move to permanent residence as soon as possible. Now let's talk about cross-border compliance and risk management. These are areas where you have to think about employment law, health and safety, tax law, in terms of making sure that you're complying and as an employer in Canada. Highly recommend you always find an employment lawyer. We can recommend some people, depending on where you are, that can help you with Canadianizing your contracts, understanding the rules, the statutory holidays, the benefits, the termination rules, all of those things. You need a good employment lawyer. So in order to be successful, if you are audited, which is likely when you come in as an immigrant and you have a business, the chances are you may be audited by immigration within 6 to 7 years. It's a random audit process, but it'll likely happen. So you need to maintain excellent documentation about the business, about immigration, org charts, payroll, in case you get audited about your foreign worker. You also need to be prepared for potential audits and site visits, especially if they're done under a labor market impact assessment or a NAFTA work permit or an intercompany transfer. We can help you with that. It's so important that you have everything saved And anything that's varying from what the LMIA approval is, you have to explain and document why. There's also some requirements to communicate with Service Canada if there's been a serious change or even a minor change in the employment terms or the salary or the workplace. Any change, you must notify immigration so that you are seen to be proactive and not reactive and not have to deal with the potential penalties leading up to not even being able to use the immigration program. You need to ensure that you properly classify your employees. Are they employees or are they contractors? Because for tax purposes, there are different things that are required. And then, of course, you need to file timely reports with the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, all the registries, and follow provincial human resources rules. So important. One thing that people don't always think about is their intellectual property. When you come to Canada, have you trademarked the name you want? Have you trademarked your taglines, your name, anything that you want to continue using and operating? You must want to consider, can you register it and secure it for yourself? Okay, let's get started now on the United States so that we can confirm exactly what those options are for you in terms of, let's say, Canadian moving to the United States to do business. Why expand to the US? Well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a huge market. It's 10 times the size of Canada. So if you're doing well here in Canada, you definitely want to consider expanding to the United States in order to grow your business, to increase your visibility, and to access the largest consumer market in the world. So this is very much a top choice for most ambitious business owners. They want that opportunity to be successful in the United States. Businesses choose the United States because of its large innovation-driven economy with high purchasing power. It's got a deep venture capital and private equity networks. They're very much skilled and diverse workforce across all major industries, and there's strong IP protections and legal safeguards for foreign investors. So before you make the move, you need to understand how your business will fit into the business landscape in the United States and how you plan to operate and where you plan to operate, as well as the tax implications. Your US structure affects your visa eligibility, and you need to think about how you set up your business. We work with many US attorneys who can help incorporate for our clients in the United States, depending on which state they want to do business in, if they want an LLC, if they want a Delaware Corp, how to structure it. And as I said, even before with the Canadian immigration, you need to think about the tax implications of where you want to be. How much tax would you have to pay, corporate and personal? Some states are better than others, so people are making decisions as to where they want to headquarter their US branch or subsidiary office when they do this application. The entity type we've talked about, it could be an S Corp, an LLC, a C Corp. You need to understand how profits are determined as well as taxes. And this is why working with an advisor is so important. And you need to think about the ownership of the business, depending on the visa category. If it's an L1A, that's based on the intercompany transfer, based on the fact that you're keeping your Canadian business in operation and staffed. There are very much differences around that. And so you don't want to shut down the Canadian business if you're in the US on an L1A or B and you have not yet gained green card status. That will limit some of your options down the line. Okay, the tax strategy, and I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but I want you to understand tax planning is critical. You want to avoid double taxation. Sometimes people don't listen to the advice we give and they get down there and after 2 or 3 years, they get dinged with a lot of tax and then they call us and say, oh my God, you were right. We should have planned this better. We should have sought tax advice. We should have structured this better. And then sometimes they have to go through the whole process to fix it. And it's very costly and time intensive and stressful. So if you can do this in advance, it's definitely going to save you money down the line. Some of the immigration pathways for entrepreneurs, founders, and investors in the United States are outlined on the deck here. The first one is going to be the E1 or E2. Those are treaty visas based on citizenship and treaties that Canada has with the United States. So usually it'll require substantial investment or active business involvement, and at least being able to show, if it's an E1, being able to show that you're already doing business in the United States. The E2 is usually based on purchasing a business or investing in a business that's already in the United States and showing where the money has come from. These applications for the E's are done for Canadians at the consulate in Toronto. The US consulate reviews everything and usually asks you to come for an interview and a meeting before they will approve the e-visa. And that could take anywhere from 4 to 8 months. So you need to plan ahead. The other thing is the L1A or L1B. As I said, the L1B is the specialized knowledge worker. The L1A is the executive transfer, the executive senior managerial. And these are for managers transferring from say the Canadian company to the US company. These applications are done at the port of entry. We do this every day for professionals at the airport into the United States, where they're encountering Customs and Border Protection at pre-arrival or I guess before you're traveling. You want to do it, you do it on Canadian soil, and then it's like you've crossed into the United States when you're at the airport and you make your application there. One other category, there's so many different ones, the EB5. This is an investor category, and this is for those that grants unconditional green card for those that are investing at least $100,000 and creating 10 US jobs, which is a lot. It's a lot. So you need to think about if this meets your criteria. The types of work permits that business executives and key personnel can have really vary. There's so many. I always say it's an alphabet of visa categories in the US from basically A to Z. But the main ones for professionals would be the L1A or the L1B, the intercompany transfer for senior managerial executive or specialized knowledge. The TN visa, the Treaty NAFTA visa. This one has a list of about 70 professions based on education: engineer, scientist, nurse, they're listed, professor, they're all listed, lawyer. And so if you get a job opportunity in Canada, this is one of the ways, in the United States, this is one of the ways you can move to the United States is by getting a TN visa at the airport. So the TNs and the L1s are done at the port of entry for Canadian citizens, which is a wonderful benefit for us. The H-1B visa is the skilled worker and the educated one for degreed professionals. This one is subject to annual cap and the lottery, so it makes it difficult. You almost have to plan a year or even a year and a half in advance if you're an employer, if you want to take advantage of the H-1B. And because it's a lottery, there's no guarantee you're going to get the number of H-1Bs that you want this year. It might take you a year or two to get selected. Some of the permanent residency options for people moving to the United States, there are some PR pathways. There's the EB1C, that's for senior executives overseeing US operations of a foreign company. There's the EB2 NIW, which is for professionals offering the national interest benefits, national interest waiver for people in STEM and healthcare, and the EB5 for direct investors in capital and employment requirements are there. So you really need to think about how, once you get there, if you're going to get to the States under TN or an L1 as a Canadian or an E1 or E2, how can you get yourself to green card? You need to always be thinking about that long-term plan, if that is your plan, so that you can start setting the stage as early as possible. So in the United States, they also have audit requirements and compliance requirements. You need to keep your I-9 files in great shape. That's the files where you put everything related to your foreign workers. And we're seeing a number of people getting raided or getting investigated for I-9 non-compliance. So you need to make sure you're working with a professional who understands this very well. And some of our US attorneys in the States do, that can help you prepare, because you do not want to have a problem with US immigration, especially these days with everything that's happening on the ground in the United States. So let's talk about next steps. This is really how businesses, very high level, can move to Canada and move to the United States. But I'm sure there are lots of questions, and I think it's important that you get your answers from us if you would like them. So feel free to schedule a legal strategy session. We charge $250 for a 30-minute strategy session to talk about your plans and the hopes you have and what are the options available. And then when you have identified with us the best fit and what you're most comfortable with and what we were most comfortable with in terms of likelihood of success, then we would send you an engagement agreement and we can get started in terms of getting the application in place for you. We would love to help build a roadmap for you from entry as a temporary resident worker on a work permit all the way to permanent residence and even eventually citizenship, if that's what your goal is. One thing to think about is that if you choose to become a citizen of Canada or the United States, you don't lose your other citizenship. You just enter, let's say if you have a US citizen, you enter the US with the US passport, even if you become a Canadian citizen. If you are a Canadian citizen coming home and you've also become a US citizen, you enter with your Canadian passport. So you can have both and be able to have the flexibility of having two different passports. So how can ACCA Law assist you? These are some of the services we provide to our clients. We love working with small and medium businesses. We love working with entrepreneurs and people that are innovative and starting up, as well as very established large companies. Having been a partner at a global law firm, I've worked with corporate clients all over the world, and we would love to be able to assist you get to the United States or get to Canada as quickly as possible and grow your business. So this is the outline of some of the services we provide. Feel free to reach out at any time, and we'd be happy to talk you through your options. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us or put up your hand if you're here so that we can help you as well figure out what your options are. And if you don't have any questions, I'm going to wrap up this webinar. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And as I said, I'm here for you. At ACCA Business Immigration Law, we do this because we love what we do. We love our clients. We focus on long-term established relationships, and we've been doing this work for decades, and it is our passion. We love to see businesses grow and thrive across borders. Look forward to talking to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.